Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 97. That's correct. It's hard to believe that we've made it this far, but episode number 97 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we are coming to you once again from the worldwide headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We have another great organization this week as we highlight the African American Museum of History and Culture. We have Guthrie with us today, who is the founder and executive director of the museum. And I would add that I consider her to be more like Gaston County royalty with everything that she does and has done and continues to do for our community. But Dot, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to the opportunity.
Absolutely. So, as we like to do, we'd like to get right to it. But first, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit before we get talking about the museum specifically. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, anything that you'd like to share?
Oh, yes. I'm a little country girl from Clover, South Carolina. I grew up on a farm, and when it was cotton picking time, I couldn't go to school. I had to stay and pick cotton so that my family would have a means of survival. After that, I graduated from Roosevelt High School, went to South Carolina State University, got a master's in education from Winthrop University. Okay.
And just for those who might not know, can you tell, I'm going to go ask a couple of questions that maybe we didn't share with you, but can you share a little bit about your experience here with the school system and other things you might do? Because we're going to spend 99% of our time talking about the museum, but I think it's interesting to hear some of your other history here with Gaston County.
Okay, with Gaston County Schools. Actually, I started here as a librarian at East Gaston High School. I worked there for several years and returned from Mount Holly, went to Lingerfeld Elementary School, where I was a librarian there, and from there I went to Charlotte Mecklenburg and worked there. Actually did open a school. I've opened 5 school libraries in my career, and I truly love them all. And now I serve on the Gaston Board of Education, where I am very happy to be able to support the education and the well-being of our children here in Gaston County.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I think it's probably come up a few times on the podcast that I'm a product of Gaston County Public Schools. My children are products of Gaston County Public Schools. And listen, and overall, we've had a great experience there, both as students, and my wife is also a product of Gaston County Public Schools. So between my wife and our family and children, we've had a great experience. So I appreciate you sharing that, Dot. So let's get to the main point today. So what can you tell us about the museum? So
everything.
Let's maybe start with the mission, and then how did it get started? Because as being the founder, I've heard the story myself, but I think our listeners will appreciate kind of just the background and what the primary mission is, and then we'll get into some more details.
Thank you so very much. Well, it all started as a librarian. I know that there are very limited number of books that cover the African American experience. Okay. And I know that in order for our children to feel good about themselves, they need to have more of their history, because our goal here is to change mindset from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So one evening while my husband was engaged watching TV and really not paying attention to what I was saying, I said to him, Bobby, instead of going on a vacation, let's use our vacation money to find a location to open an African American museum. He said, okay, not knowing what he was committing to.
That sounds like a typical husband-wife conversation.
So I held him to that, and we were very fortunate in that we were able to find a location in the beautiful historic Laurie Mill.
Right.
And with the help of my mentor, Anthony Gallant, we were able to open the museum on a rainy Saturday morning on February 16th, 2019. and we had over 400 people there.
Wow.
So what does that tell us? That folk were ready to hear more about African American diaspora and the experience.
All right. Well, that's interesting. So, right before COVID hit, huh?
Right before COVID hit, yes, and we were really going. We had seen over 4,000 people.
Oh, wow.
From February 16th until March 16th, 2020, when we had to close the doors. We were having guests from all over the Carolinas coming. Claude Alexander from University Park had his technology team to come down and do their church announcements from the museum.
Okay.
Folk were really, really catching on,
Right.
and we were really, really smiling. And it stopped us for a while.
Sure.
COVID did, for 2 years.
Pretty much everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But we did not let that deter our vision, because we thought, okay, we must keep this excitement going.
Sure.
So we created a little program because we knew that children were home, parents were home, and they needed things for children to do. So we created this little program with an acronym entitled GRAB, G-R-A-B, which stood for Great Reading African American Books. So we asked our leadership in Gaston to be guest readers. Brandon Bellamy read,
Okay.
Anthony Gallant read. We had folk from across the country joining us to read. Dr. Lonnie Reed from Cincinnati, who had been an inventor at NASA, but he graduated from Holland High School.
Okay, wow.
So he joined us to read to the children, because at 10 each and every Wednesday, they logged on via Zoom, and we made the connection.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, there were some. I hate to use the word good things coming from that time period, but the flexibility and being able to at times reach people maybe further away.
Yes.
And connect with that. So it did open some doors maybe that we might not have even tried to open before that. So. You kind of talked about the mission, how you got it started. That was a great conversation. I hope my wife doesn't hear this episode. She's probably going to say, "I've have those conversations, Dot, with Stephen." So, kind of, can you talk about the broader initiatives? Kind of now that things hopefully are getting more back to normal. What's the life in the week of the museum? Kind of what are some of the things you're going on? I'm not sure initiatives or programs is the right word, but kind of just describe what you can about kind of what's going on now with the museum.
We have programs. We offer programs to visitors, every age group. We have folk coming at least once a week. Now, I said at least once a week.
Gotcha.
From Charlotte-Mecklenburg,
Okay.
the seniors come because the good news reached Charlotte-Mecklenburg, so they come over. I do school groups. The largest group that I've done this year, we actually did take all of the Greer students from 6th, 7th, and 8th graders one day. The second day, in 3 days, we worked with Greer students, and we actually did partner with Cross, the technology company there in the building, and they read to the children. We saw over 1,000 children in the month of February. And we went to Gaston Day, and we saw over 300 children there. But schools managed to schedule, they come in. We are mentoring a young lady who's an instructor from Clover High School. This is Clover's first year for offering African American studies.
Okay.
So Miss Wiggins will come in, and she'll bring her students. She brought them from her first semester, and she brought them from her second semester. And we talk about the history of Gaston County. But since I grew up in Clover and I taught in Clover, we talk about the history. We want to make the connection.
Sure.
We want to establish a relationship. So we see, we go out to the agricultural center and we do programs for the seniors. We actually do programs for sororities and fraternities. Last year and the year before, even during COVID, we had like a little online summer enrichment program, and we did some enrichment last year. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do it this year. It's hard to find great volunteers now that we're back in person after COVID.
Right.
So that's a challenge that we're facing now. But the one great thing, and I say this to those that are listening, we were honored to have the opportunity to speak for the state on behalf of African American History Month in February. I was the keynote speaker for the state via Zoom.
Oh, wow.
I was the keynote speaker for Vallon Distributors in Belmont via Zoom. And I had the great honor of going to Vallon to do a program for them during their conference last November. And they are now coming to help me to create what we're going to have is a research library. We cannot be Schomburg of New York, but we will be a small library that will cover African American history and culture. So we're working in partnership with Belmont Abbey, Dr. Stratton, who is the Dean of Education. Okay. We're working in partnership with Clover. We're working in partnership with App State, doing some things. So we are really out there ready and willing to work. And we have created, the gallery is divided into 8 zones. Zone 1 covers Gastonia. Zone 2, the municipalities. Zone 3, windows of knowledge, the inventors, etc. Zone 4, sports. Zone 5, armed forces, military. Zone 6, faith-based and women. Zone 7, public relations. And Zone 8, nostalgia. Now that's where you hear the sobbing. That's where you hear all of the stories. Because when our seniors get to that area, I can't tell them what I've prepared as far as my script, my text.
Right.
They tell me what they remember from that era.
Yeah, that's
it's an exciting time.
Something they may have experienced
That
personally.
is correct.
Wow.
Yes, it is wonderful. But we are embedding the North Carolina educational standards into our curriculum because we want to justify why schools are allowing their students to leave their campuses to visit the African American Museum. As a librarian, I realize the importance of that.
Oh, sure.
As a member of the school board, I realize how important it is for our children to stay on task.
Right.
So it is important to embed those North Carolina educational standards into the museum's curriculum.
All right. Well, that was a lot. Okay, you just shared there. So, simply said, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
And I like I heard the word partnerships and collaboration a lot there, which is what it takes, right? To really get. And I appreciate you mentioning Vallon. And I've been involved with United Way for a long time, and Vallon is a company that has come in and they really have stepped up and are involved in a lot of things in the community. So it's good to hear that they're involved there. So you that was a lot to absorb. So can you share one of the questions I like to ask is in the last 4 years, can you think of some examples of maybe some anecdotal stories of something that you've seen was a real impact, either with some children or an organization or a group or something that occurred that you're like, wow, that proves this is the reason we started this. Yeah. I mean, something that maybe you can share that you've seen as really impactful. I'm sure you've got lots of stories, but is there something that you could share for our listeners that, wow, that's really the reason we started this?
When we have children come through with their classes, and we take them through the museum, and we talk about the first African-American doctor in Gastonia, and the many challenges that he faced. And when we talk about financial literacy and the importance of using your best judgment when you're buying a book at the school book fair and not wanting to spend all of your parents' money because you see every book you think you want.
Sure.
Children will go home and they'll say to their parents, Miss Dot told us how to spend money at the book fair. And parents will come. Some children have returned knowing that we had a donation box and they were unable to give a donation. They'll go home and bring their parents back to see the museum and say to me, I want to put this in the donation box. And that touches my heart.
Sure.
Because they realize that it's important for all children to know the history. It's important for us to embed financial literacy into what we're doing. We actually showed the children Dr. Harold Williston's medical bag, which is over 90 years old. Dr. Williston delivered my husband. So we showed them the tools. One child from Pleasant Ridge Elementary School, whose mom was a doctor, he wanted her to come to the museum so that she could see the doctor's bag that was 90 years old. That's heartfelt.
Sure it is.
I had to remove, when you're opening a museum, if folk trust you with their artifacts, with their treasures, they're going to give them. They're going to donate them to you because they realize that they are going to be kept in good hands. I had to remove some shackles that were donated to the museum because when the seniors got to that nostalgic area, they wept.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I wanted them to weep, remembering the great things that were happening. So we just tell them, and we have artifacts that are there. But we don't know how those things will affect our attendees. So for now, they're downstairs in storage because I want them to remember the wash pot and how they either use well water to heat, to wash clothes, or the wash pot to have soup at the creek on Saturday mornings. And a church would try to raise money. That was their way of raising money to sell soup while the fishermen were there fishing. Okay. They could come up and get a good bowl of hot soup. So those are the things that I remember. And then I ask, and I see the expressions and the joyful eyes raised. I ask, how many of you like ranch dressing? And they raise their hands. And I'll say to them, do you know that it was a black cowboy named Steve Hansen that invented ranch dressing? Yes, it was. Steve was a cook on the prairie with the cowboys. And they wouldn't eat their vegetables, just like some of you, when you were young, wouldn't eat your vegetables.
And maybe me still now.
So it's amazing to see the many expressions. Or when I show them the box that Henry Box Brown used to mail himself from Virginia as a slave to Philadelphia to become a free man. Mm. I show them that. And we show them the book, Henry Box Brown. Then I ask them about genres because I want to make sure that our children understand literature and genres. What's a biography? It's something about a person's life. Well, I'm going to tell you about Henry Box Brown, and it's a biography, and it's true. This is a story about Henry Box Brown. It's amazing what we can do, what we have done. There's an old tricycle that's on display in the museum. Growing up in the little town of Clover, we had a tricycle that 3 of us had to share. But I did not know that it was invented by Matthew Cherry, a black inventor. I love potato chips. I did not know that George Crumb invented the Saratoga chip. As a cook in New York, a rich lady came in. She ordered some fried potatoes. George fixed the potatoes and sent them out to her. They did not meet with her satisfaction, so she sent them back. George said, okay, I'll fix her. I'm going to slice these potatoes as thinly as I can get them, and I'm going to fry them to a crisp. he did that. He sent back out a plate of chips. She ate every last one of them and then said, "Give my compliments to the chef."
She didn't know what she was missing.
That's
huh?
exactly right.
That's funny. And that's something you can find in pretty much everybody's house probably, right, today.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
that's interesting.
yes.
Well, those are such great points because there's so many examples of that, for probably in all cultures, and we just don't know the stories,
Can I
right?
tell you one more?
Absolutely.
It was amazing to receive an old yellow Gastonia Gazette newspaper before COVID. And I saw information about the Tuskegee Airmen,
Right?
the National Tuskegee Airmen. Little did I know that Lieutenant Marshall Schuyler Cabinets was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. He graduated from Howland High School right here in Gastonia and Morehouse College. We have history.
Right.
That's what we
I think
need
that's
to
the only
share.
one that you've described that I've heard of. I don't know a lot about it, but I had heard that from, I don't remember where, but I may have heard it from you somewhere along the line and hearing you speak more than once. So, wow, so that's good. So what would you say, this is a similar question, but since you started this, is there something that you can say, what are you most proud of accomplishing to this point with the museum?
Community recognition and appreciation. Because we have seen our community come. We have, through data, and data is very important, we have shown that folk have come. They've come with families. They've come through faith-based. They've come with churches. And now we are having the opportunity to reach out. It was 2 years ago, I think, that Gaston County celebrated their birthday. And I brought a little booklet to the courthouse to show that there were 2 pages that covered African American history in Gaston County. And I assured them then that the next time, now I won't be around, but the next time Gaston County celebrates its 100th year,
Right.
we'll have a book. We'll have a book because I'm writing the book.
Ah, good for you.
And we are going to make certain that we tell the story that we have had lawyers, doctors, leaders in every area, our own. First Councilwoman, City of Gastonia, our own First Commissioner woman, Pearl Florida Danielle. They're all here now. And we want our children to know. Brandon Bellamy and I did an ESPN segment to cover Ransom Hunter, believed to be the first freed slave to own land in Gaston County. And Brandon Bellamy and I discussed how Ransom Hunter was determined, just as Brandon has been. And the Ransom Hunter family invited me to the grave sites when they last July placed a bench there in Mount Holly in memory of Ransom Hunter. Now, the funny thing about that is I worked as a branch librarian right there at Mount Holly, and the gravesite was right there, 3 acres. Little did I know then that history was right there. So that's why we must have a museum that can be a textbook for the diversity that we have in Gaston County. And I am telling you, I am so proud and I am so grateful to have such an opportunity to work with all groups, all races here in Gaston. I have worked from the state all the way down to the pre-K, and we are sharing quality resources that I strongly believe that is appreciated by all. It's not what you present. It's how you present.
Sure. Is it fair to say that part of the big mission and what I'm hearing from you is a lot of it is making sure children know what's possible?
Making sure that children know what's possible, but also making sure that grown-ups know how important it is to work with children to help them understand how important diversity is
sure.
in our county.
Yeah, through this podcast, in my involvement in the community the last 20 to 25 years, relatively speaking, Gaston County is a relatively diverse community, more so than some. And then the involvement in so many, initiatives, government, the school system, just even private business. It's a really diverse place. And if you're not touched by all those organizations and groups and don't travel a little bit, you might not realize that.
That is correct. And let me tell you what happened last October. Lucy Pinnaker, my dear friend Lucy, invited the museum to participate in the Cotton Fest in Dallas. And they had like an African-American house there. So I, along with one of my board members, went. And we were there from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock. And we saw over 400 people come through. And we were able to tell the African-American story from its early beginning. And I have you know that there were little young children coming through along with their parents. They were attentive. And all of those attendees, those that traveled through, were very receptive of the story that we told. You are absolutely right. But how will we know that if we're not telling the story or talking about it together?
It's so easy for us to get caught up in our day-to-day world and interactions that we have. You need to be intentional about, exposing yourself to all the stories, all the history, all the other things that are going on around here besides what's happening inside the walls of GSM here today, or whatever the case may be.
There's an old African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. And I do believe that here in Gaston, that we have a village that's more interested in raising our children and growing our county as a tool or a hook for others to see what we are doing and may want to migrate to Gaston.
Oh, I think that's terrific. That's very, very well said. So we've covered a lot of stuff that you've been doing, stuff that's going on right now. So looking ahead, over the next few years for the museum, are there any big plans, anything going on, or how do you see, the future playing out for what you are doing at the museum?
I want a building.
Okay.
We want
freestanding,
our own freestanding building. That's a dream, and we can dream just
Absolutely.
as we had the dream to open the museum, and we had Good Samaritans. This is my opportunity. You're giving it to me. I want a building.
Well, good. Hey, you never know who's listening.
And it will be a building that will represent or continue to represent excellence. And we want to be able to, through our strategic plan, to be able to offer our community more hours so that they can visit the museum. As I stated earlier, before COVID, we were open. Everyone felt rejuvenated, excited. After COVID, it's hard to get volunteers, so we're only open on Tuesdays and Fridays from 11 to 4. Okay. But I do open for special groups, like I was there Saturday for a special group. And on Wednesdays, if we have groups from Charlotte that want to come, I open. But that's part of the strategic plan. We want a building, and we want to be able to, let me tell you one other thing. We are working with publishers across the country now because of my position that I'll have. And we're working with the Gaston Little Theater. So we wrote a grant from the city, and we received the grant. So we are bringing to the Gaston Little Theater the first weekend in February. we're partnering with the Gaston Little Theater, and we're going to bring a Coretta Scott King Book Awards play that's been written by the director of the Little Theater. We're bringing it to life. The first weekend in February, that Friday, a matinee, that Saturday evening, and that Sunday, we're bringing Beautiful Blackbird, the title of the book, written and illustrated by the awesome late Ashley Bryan. We're bringing that to our city. Members of the Coretta Scott King at the national level are so proud to hear that we are bringing this to Gastonia.
Well, you mentioned something I want to go back to, because I think before we started recording, you talked about the position you're getting ready to assume and something getting ready to happen in Chicago, if I remember correctly. Why don't you go ahead and share that real quick?
Okay. It was an honor to view the results of the ballots. The Coretta Scott King Book Awards round table had on its ballot my name along with someone else to become the next president of the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Virginia Hamilton president.
Okay.
So I will fly to Chicago next Thursday, and while in Chicago, I will be named Vice President, President-elect of the Coretta Scott King Virginia Hamilton Roundtable, affiliated with the American Library Association. What an honor.
That's terrific.
And I want Gaston to be represented. And my first plan is, as president, well, now I'm in charge of programming across the country. My first plan is to get each state to participate in the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Literature Week. I want the children, and this will start on the day that we celebrate MLK Day. Okay. We want the children to be able to make the connection between Dr. King and the Coretta Scott King Book Awards.
Gotcha.
We've done this now for 3 years. We started with Zoom, we continued with Zoom, and we will do Zoom again. Why? Because we're reaching across the country. But where is this all coming from? Gastonia, North Carolina. So
just another example of you bringing national attention here to Gaston County, and so I appreciate that. And I think what's today? We're recording this on June 14th. So by the time this is released, that will all have occurred. So you will already be in, when the time our listeners are hearing this, you will have already assumed that position. That's great. So we do have a few Gaston County related questions, Dot, that we'd like to ask. But before we do that, is there anything I haven't asked? Anything that, the main thing before we finish, we'll make sure our listeners know how to find information about the museum, where it's located again, what the hours are, any volunteer opportunities. We'll make sure we do that as kind of the last thing that we talk about. But any other questions I haven't asked that I should have asked, or anything you'd like to share before we shift gears briefly?
We have a donation box.
Okay.
Let me tell you this. This weekend is very exciting as well as historic. Aunt Charlotte, they call her Aunt Charlotte. We call her Aunt Charlotte because that's all we've known from the newspaper clippings. But Charlotte McClee was an enslaved woman, midwife, that migrated from Lewis Point in Chester County to Avon Street here in Gastonia.
Okay.
This weekend we will be celebrating Juneteenth.
Right.
So we are working with the City of Gastonia to participate in that weekend event. On Saturday evening at 5:30, we will have Charlotte McClee's family in the museum for a very special program. We're going to unveil Charlotte's photo painting, and she will, of course, find her permanent location in the museum.
That's nice.
There will be a story told, and the lesson plan has already been created. So we'll do that, and we're very proud to be able to bring home more of the legends that made an impact. And received a call last evening from Charlotte's granddaughter, who told the story that Charlotte walked from Avon Street all the way downtown. Leon Snyder was the mayor at one time here in Gastonia.
Okay.
Well, she birthed Leon Snyder, and she heard that he was going to come campaign for mayor. So she walked all the way down to where he was, and the family thought they'd lost her, little fragile lady. And then they were sitting on the steps. I heard this as late as last night. And this big black shiny car pulled up in front of this house. And a man got out, a chauffeur got out, walked around, opened the door, and out popped Aunt Charlotte. Leon had her chauffeured back to the house on Avon Street.
Funny. That's good.
You're getting these stories.
Yeah.
They are stories that need to be told. They're human interest stories,
Right.
as well as stories when you tell the children, their little eyes just grow and grow and grow, but they are retaining because, as we said earlier, we want to move our children from, if they walk through that door with a fixed mindset, thinking that they can't, by the time they exit, we want them to have developed a growth mindset. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, known as the father of Negro History Week, which later became Negro History Month or Black History Month, said, and I quote, "If a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it stands in danger of being exterminated." Well, we've just spent 15 or 20 minutes talking about the awesome history
Sure.
that we have here in Gaston, and there's more to come.
Oh, I'm sure. You know, I feel like we should stop the whole podcast after that. But you know what? I'm selfish, and I have the mic, so we're going to go down this little road here of these Gaston County questions, and because I can, and we're going to call this the former librarian speed round of questions.
Okay.
All right. So you've been here long enough in Gaston County, obviously, to be able to answer these questions. So what is your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Strawberry ripple or butter pecan, too.
Wow. Doubling up, huh?
Yes.
Butter pecan was my dad's favorite. Are you a Sundrop or Cheerwine person?
Pepsi Cola.
Dang. She's not going to answer. How about favorite local restaurant, Dot?
Well, Longhorns or whatever it's called.
Okay, yeah. Longhorns is great. How about when you're not at the museum? What's the favorite outdoor activity or here in Gaston County, or a favorite park or something that you like to do?
Well, really, when I'm not in the museum, I'm home working on things
Gotcha.
that are related or should be in the museum,
Okay.
right?
All
Like
right.
I'm making a quilt right now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good story. I mean, is the quilt something they can see in the museum now, or is it somewhere else?
It will be, well, I haven't finished. I'm working on
Okay.
squares now.
Got it.
But Dr. Dixie Abernathy borrowed the first African-American quilt that was made, and she took it to the Cramerton Historic Society
Okay.
and actually have had that on display for a couple of days.
So it can be seen in Cramerton at the
Yes.
moment. All right, this is a question that I ask all of our guests, regardless of whether they have any connection to any of these schools or not. But I might modify it a little bit for you today. So, and there's only one correct answer too, by the way,
Okay.
for this one.
Well, I figured that.
But UNC, Duke, NC State, or South Carolina State?
My son graduated from North Carolina State.
Oh, he must be a good
I'm a
man.
wolf pack.
That's what I'm talking about. Give me something. Give me something. That's fantastic. I knew you were going to be the best guest ever. Wow.
You're a wolf pack.
Yes, I am.
Right.
Yes.
Oh.
I'm an engineer. I'm an engineering graduate from NC State. So this one might be tough. These are the questions, but I'm really wanting to hear your answer to this one. Can you share something that very few people know about you?
I'm associate minister at Tabernacle Baptist Church.
Really? Oh, wow. Well,
I
that's
was called
interesting.
into the ministry in 2009
Okay.
because I have to go where he sent me.
Yeah, so I think so many people hear that calling sometimes, but they don't want to answer, right?
Well, I didn't want to answer, but I never had peace of mind until I said, I yield, I yield, I yield.
Oh, wow, that's good. So this one might be difficult, just knowing your background. is there a book or something, even a blog or article or book or something that has been impactful to you that you could share for our listeners?
To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, written by Lorraine Hasbury, because it provides the bibliotherapy that children need.
Okay. Can you say that title again?
To Be Young, Gifted, and Black,
Okay.
by Lorraine Hansberry.
All right. Well, I appreciate that because I'm a big reader. I'm always looking for, my next book to buy and put on my shelf.
Book. I'm an author too.
I did not know that.
My book was published in 2011, September 2011, Integrating African American Literature in the Library and Classroom. It is not a novel. It's for teachers to use. I reviewed over 300 books and created lesson plans for teachers so that they could embed those lesson plans into their lesson plans.
Very good.
To teach children how to appreciate literature, diverse literature.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I would be disappointed if you didn't share that when we had the chance here. So, listen, I appreciate you indulging us on those Gaston County related questions. Just a couple more questions, Dot, and we'll wrap this episode up. But this is a question I like to ask because it's, remember, this podcast is about Gaston County and the great things that are going on here. So besides the African American Museum of History and Culture, why would you say, Gaston County is such a great place?
Well, we discussed earlier that, Gaston County is more interested in integrated activities and trying to make sure that every person feels like he or she is a part of the puzzle.
Right.
That is so important. One member, one body, many members. And we each have this unique part to play. And I see Gaston County doing that because if I'm working with the Gaston Tourism, and we did when we brought the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit, there was nothing for Gaston Tourism. They just said, yes, we'll work with you. We will certainly do what's needed. And each and every time that I've submitted, I better not say this too loudly, knock on wood, each and every time that I've submitted a grant, letting folk know the needs that I have, the grants have been approved. So when they approve, they see how we are trying to grow. And when I say they, I'm inclusive of the various organizations.
Right.
And we had our gala in February. I belonged to the chamber, and the chamber was right there. And we had other partners right there supporting the African American Museum at the Gastonia Conference Center. That makes you feel good.
Sure.
Knowing that you have so many people from different organizations in support and believe in what you're doing.
Well, it's a testament to you and the work you're doing. And I think people here have been here long enough know that anything you're involved with is, what's the word? It's going to be for the right reasons, and for good causes. And it's not just, and it's sure not for your personal gain. That's obvious in what you're doing. So this is, I think I say this every single week. This is my favorite question probably. But Dot, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Get my PhD. I really, really believe that I could have done, I could do more I was going to go back. I talked with Gardner Webb in December of last year to inquire about that because I really want to teach more. And if I can get into the academics as far as colleges and universities, then I can better prepare those educators that are coming out of school to talk about the mannerisms and the different gestures that a culture may have to better help them understand.
You think that would maybe open a few more doors for you on that level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that. So, Dot, this has really been terrific. And so, like I said before, the main point here is just to bring awareness to your organization, to our community. So where can listeners go to learn more, find out about potential, the hours and where it's located, and any volunteer opportunities coming up? And I think I heard you say earlier that you do, you would in need of some volunteers. So just share anything and everything that you can there about that.
Thank you. Actually, if you would like to know more about the African American Museum, we do have a website. Mm-hmm. We have a Facebook page as well. Okay. We would welcome volunteers, and of course, I like to train the docents myself.
Sure.
And we will always be happy to provide any interested group with a program. And I like to conduct the tours myself.
Okay.
And we do not have to limit a request for a program only for a Tuesday or Friday.
Sure.
I can be flexible at all times. Flexibility is important because I want folk to know that we do have a little gym over at Lorraine Mill that we're willing to share. So we appreciate that, and we're on Instagram as well.
Okay. Well, so
we do a newsletter too.
Okay.
And if they would like to, and we are very proud of our newsletter, and if they would like to subscribe to our newsletter, it's a monthly newsletter, just send an email. We do have a way for our listeners to correspond to us if they go to our email address, which is africanamericangaston@gmail.com, and request a newsletter.
Okay.
We can put them on our mailing list.
I think I saw the email listed on the website.
Yes.
And it's a great. I spent some time on the website yesterday. It's great. It's a great website. So you can really get a feel for the museum and some of the things going on, and so again, I appreciate that. So any last words or anything you'd like to share before we close this episode out?
I am so grateful to have had this opportunity to talk with you about the museum. We don't take lightly what we do in the museum.
Yes, ma'am.
We are professionals. We believe in excellence, and we welcome any group and any opportunity to talk about the museum to our Gaston or surrounding counties. We are educationally, we're equipped because we are aligning our zones with educational standards. We believe in that. So you won't waste your time. Our tours usually are about 40 to 45 minutes,
okay,
based on the number of questions that are asked as we journey through. And as I said earlier, we want our own building. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. So anybody listeners out there have you heard it here, and you know what? Those are good. Think big, right? There's no point in thinking small about what's next. So again, I appreciate that very much, Dot. And I appreciate all you've done for our community over so many years. And it's obvious that you have made a positive impact on so many so many kids and people and adults now, right? That have grown up here. And so I'm grateful for that.
It's amazing. I told stories to now parents who are telling their children that I told them stories.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Well, you know what? Teachers, librarians, coaches in the school system, I've got so many people that I could name right now that made a big impact on me, and 99% is all positive,
That's great.
There's, in any organization, there's that occasional, hiccup, but gosh, 99% is pretty good.
That's right.
That's pretty good, pretty good percentage. So, as I normally do, I'm going to finish with my own little book recommendation and my thought for the week. And for your listeners out there, if you've listened to enough episodes, you know that I'm a big leadership study person. I read a lot about that. And I just recently finished a book from Admiral William McRaven, who is a former Navy SEAL and someone I respect a lot. I like what he writes, but his most recent book is The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, which is a really good leadership book I would say so, and it's relatively short read, so I would recommend that one. And then my quote or thought for this week, I was intentional about this one. I picked one from George Washington Carver, and I tell you what, he is just a treasure trove of quotes and thoughts, and just you can learn a lot from just Googling his name, and you can really learn a lot. But he said, "Education is the key to unlock the golden door of freedom." So take that for what it's worth, and education is kind of the theme for today's episode, and not in a lot of different ways, historical and also just the ongoing education that I think is so important. And obviously school education is super important, but there's so many opportunities for education. I mean, I think I tell people all the time that I've learned more by reading, listening to podcasts, and I've learned much more since I graduated college than I did during my college days. So if you're willing to learn, the opportunities are there. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast, because we know that if you can share the podcast episode, whether it's on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts or wherever, that's how we get noticed. And please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at our website at gastonsgreat.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And please follow us on all our social media platforms. And as Naomi reminds me every week, give us a good 5-star rating. That helps the podcast get noticed. Thanks again to Dot for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Naomi Hunt and Amy Anderson from GSM Services. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.